Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at A Favorable Wind on Full Sails by the artist Arantoochika. That's all one name. This is a indie manga that's published, been translated and brought over by Glacier Bay. That's pretty much what Glacier Bay does as a company, is they find indie manga and translate it, which is really, really cool because we're only typically getting exposed to the most successful stuff, and that's not necessarily the most artistically compelling stuff. So I'm pretty prone to buying anything new that Glacier Bay puts out. This one is like mid-tier for me, I'll say right out the gate, in terms of the stuff that they've put out. It's a bunch of short stories, and it just depends on the story which one I like. And there's also, this is obviously a very young artist, and so there's some real development. The earlier stuff in the book is actually the more developed work, and the later that you go in the book, it seems like the earlier in the career you are. So they're short stories. I don't know that there's any big takeaway from the book. There's a lot of visually compelling stuff, and the stories are engaging while you read them, but I don't know that any of them are really impactful to me. But you can see where this guy is going with his work, like the way he's doing autobiography, it seems like, but not so explicit that you can tell. It just has the feeling of a young 20-something kind of bumming around, living that life, and then coming up with stories. Like this one, for instance, is someone shows up at someone's door and is telling their friend that they killed their dad. So I don't think that that's necessarily a situation he really lived through, but it has some of the flavor of, a real lived life. Graphically, there's some really compelling kind of formal and graphic stuff going on. Like I really, really just enjoy the graphics of this staircase here with the character at the bottom, like walking up and then leading you across. There's a lot of things like that throughout the book. This is another one where the characters are obviously like coming down this staircase. So you kind of come in here and then follow them down and follow the dialogue and down and out and create almost a loop in the page, which is a very strange move when your readers are reading across this way to kind of bring them back out the page like that. And then just some of the kind of more static moments like this with slight motion, I just think are really graphically compelling. So there's a lot of that going on. The reproduction on this, I'm not sure if it's the artist that's putting thick lines too close together, if the reproduction is a little clogged up, but the line work does look a little clogged up to me. Other than, and some of the tones and stuff are a little strange as well. This short story here is about a failed mangaka growing up and giving up. So that's another where I feel like this guy's kind of struggling a little bit as an underground artist and playing with those ideas. But again, really like just going in a strip like this and leaving these big empty borders here. That works really, really well to kind of give like this sense of a whole time passing. These characters kind of skinny dipping here. Really nice. This one here is a breakup story, and I really like the page turn here. I don't think I've ever seen that in a manga before. I've seen that in plenty of Western comics, but I'm not sure that I've ever seen a page turn like that in a manga. So just that kind of thing alone is really interesting to see. And then there are moments of really like terse little writing that I like. Our floaty walking isn't because our bodies are light, it's because our steps are meaningless. And I think just packing into two sentences, there's a lot there. But again, going back to that sense of like meandering youth, you're kind of floating around with nothing going on. A lot of these scenes you can see are like people wandering around the city at night. There seems to be a real obsession with like staircases and things like that. Getting high up, it seems like is something, this kind of above removed sense of reality. You can even see here like looking at a plane and pondering. So, and actually that's a really nice little abstraction of a plane flying by now that I'm taking a lot of time to look at it. That's a really nice little drawing. So there's a lot of really good stuff like that I think creates a mood over the book, but that's why I'm saying it's like a mood that I was in for the moment, but then it didn't like stay with me, which is fine. Like when you're in these interstitial spaces like this, you're kind of in the mood of the moment and then you leave it. So that might be intentional. Then you get into what seems like the earlier work, and the drawing here is definitely not as good, but there's still a lot of play with panels. And I find that really compelling. This is obvious that this person was interested in doing things different with their comics than is mainstream. And to see that from early on is really cool. These later stories didn't get me as much. And then this one here, I think, was probably visually my favorite, and also intellectually my favorite. The story Unsoft Skin. So he starts with a photograph kind of adjusted like you'll get in a lot of more popular manga to make a background, and then redraws it here, and it has these characters walking by talking about the idea. I remember the first time I actually thought about this was Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. They're talking about the idea that when you're not looking at the world, it goes away. And then they're also talking about the idea, well, it's not like it goes away, it's just that your perception is mapping onto it what it is, and that they might be seeing things different. So he's basically following these characters as they walk. There's just a slow pan as they walk, but changing styles with each background pretty much. And I think that's really interesting, talking about how different people are perceiving different aspects of the environment around them. And that does, to some extent, reform the world. It's not that the world's entirely relative. It's just that there's a body of data, and people can interpret the data different ways. And that's visually represented really well. This is just a little, I think it's just those 3 pages. Just those 3 pages. So that's a really potent point to be put in 3 pages. That's probably the one that sticks with me. And this actually is something I'll probably show students at some point. So really, really like that. But the rest of the work had this more vague atmospheric thing that, I guess it depends on my mood whether I'm into work like that or not. But I do think it's really accomplished work. And then there's some like little one-off illustrations and things like that in the back that didn't land with me. And then really, really interesting, in the end here, there's a Go-Go Allen by Fukumoto Masahashi, which is like the intro outro to the book, and it's another professional mangaka who's been asked, who knew Alan as a kid, Arantoochika, just calling it Alan as saying that's the artist's real name, saying I knew this person from high school. And it's a really strange little essay where it's kind of like, this guy's kind of a narcissistic prick. I don't know. It was a really strange. It seems like friends like ribbing each other, probably. But things like saying sometimes the narcissism is so apparent in Alan's comics that it's a bit gross. But in the end, it's kind of cool, isn't it? Things like that, statements like that. But also his pictures are just really, really great. You could even make them into playing cards. It's a really, normally I don't read this type of stuff, but just a couple of those statements caught my eye when I was flipping through it, and I had to read it because it seemed like such a strange thing to ask someone to write and then to publish. And he says, but in the end, him being happy is the most important thing, so I think he should do whatever he wants. I'm sorry if I went and got my hopes up for him, and sorry I disappointed myself because of them. There were times when having a classmate by my side who drew good manga was frustrating, and it made me want to kill him. But those feelings are nowhere to be found now. I wish the best for him. So that was in an already kind of strange, amorphous book, that was a strange, amorphous ending. And I think that's totally appropriate. So a strange little book, an amorphous little book, but with definitely some pieces in it that not stick with me, but made me think, or definitely gave me a mood. And that one I probably will use as an educational tool. But yeah, this is a really good example of what Glacier Bay is doing. And you can see the cover here, the design work on the cover. I really like this, especially on the back with this kind of screen printed look. So I think Glacier Bay as a publisher is a publisher, like I said, that pretty much anything they put out, I'm going to give it a try, because I believe in their mission. I believe in what they're doing of exposing the American audience to the more experimental aspects of what's going on in Japan, because my mind, I think that doesn't even happen in Japan, just because I've never seen it. So really, really, even if it's not this book you get, definitely go to Glacier Bay, check out their catalog, and get as much of their work as you can. And I think they deserve it, and we deserve it. We deserve these kinds of things coming over. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel and you want to support us, the 2 ways to do that are through our Patreon, and then buying the books that Sean puts out. At our Patreon, you can get early access to our videos, and then at a higher tier, you can get access to exclusive comic content, early previews of the books that we're working on, things like that. Any money that we make off Patreon helps us buy the books that we review, so we put it right back into the community and just help us expose you to these kinds of works. And then to support Living the Line itself, you support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of his projects now. The Exile by Eric Creek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Eric Creek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, like, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick up. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.